There's a lot that could impress you about the all-new Honda Prologue EV. True, it's got class-leading passenger space and clean, thoughtful design and intuitive technology. But what really sets the Prologue apart from the competition is that it's more than an EV. It's a Honda. Honda, the power of dreams. Visit honda.com/prologue to learn more.
A science story, huh?
These NYU scientists, they
felt
right.
I was so
and I just thought, well,
I figured it out.
It was that golden moment.
Because science was on my side.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Story Collider, where we bring you true personal stories about science. I'm your host, Erin Barker, and the Story Collider staff is still on vacation for the holidays this week. So we're bringing you two of our favorite stories that have aired in years past, from journalist Daniel Engber and scientist Baratunde Cola. In today's stories, we're examining the science of sports. Our first story today is from Daniel Engber. It was recorded in July 2014 at Littlefield in Brooklyn.
So the science of sports. I'm not particularly good at sports, but I am particularly bad at science. I was a grad student in neuroscience. I was a particularly bad grad student in neuroscience, studying the neuroscience of motor control in humans and in cats. And the reason I was bad, or one of the reasons I was bad, is that I was kind of a daydreamer. And I know it's true that there are many great scientists, Nobel Prize winning scientists who were daydreamers. I read once that Alexander Fleming would take breaks from doing his research, and he would take this wire metal loop and he would drag it through microbes that bloom different colors and smear it on agar plates. And he'd sort of make these multicolored paintings in petri dishes. And then he found this wonderful pigment one day, this brilliant blue-green fungus that was penicillium. But I was not that kind of daydreamer. I was like sort of distractible, didn't do his work, did a lot of surfing the web when he should have been doing experiments, that kind of thing. And one day when I was in the lab, I was kind of daydreaming about something that had happened the night before. The night before, I had gone to Oakland to see a basketball game. I'd seen a Golden State Warriors game. And I'd noticed in the game that whenever one of the opposing players was shooting a free throw, the people in the stands behind the Golden State backboard would be waving their arms like this, trying to distract the shooter. They'd be waving these pieces of styrofoam, these styrofoam noodles they call wiggle sticks that they hand out for just this purpose. And it's not like I didn't know that this happened. It's just this was the first time I thought about it. And, you know, I'd done enough experiments on hand-eye coordination or paw-eye coordination to know that this was just like a terrible, terrible idea. I mean, just the worst idea. Because if you do this, you're making all this motion in all different directions, and it'll sort of cancel out and just turn into white noise. And if the brain is good at one thing, it's separating signal from noise and just ignoring all of that. So I had this sense that this was just a miserable way to do it, and I was in the lab, and I was surfing and doing whatever other than my work, and I started looking up basketball stats. And I figured if I looked up on NBA.com, free throw percentages for different teams while at home and on the road and compared them, I could figure out if it really worked. Because if all those pom-poms and wiggle sticks and all that stuff works, then teams should shoot better at home than on the road. But in fact, if you look across the whole league, teams shoot exactly the same at home and on the road to within like 1/20th of 1%. So this was proof, to me at least, that these things don't work. They don't work at all. They emphatically don't work. So naturally, I started thinking about whether there's something that would work, whether there was like a scientifically valid way to distract free throw shooters. So as it happens, a paper had just been published, sort of in my subfield, about targeted reaching movements against a field of coherent motion. And basically, it was just what happens if you try to reach for something and the world in front of you kind of slides to one side. And what happens, it turns out, is that it's sort of intuitive, but if the world slides to one side, you interpret it sort of unconsciously as you're moving the other way. And your brain makes a very quick correction for that. It might only be a millimeter, but it occurred to me that even a tiny correction would be enough to, throw off one of these very precise NBA shooters. And this could really work in the NBA. And so I said to myself, like, that is a fantastic idea. That is really amazing. You are amazing. And I had this whole conversation about that. And then I was like, I need to tell someone about my amazing idea, and I need to tell someone in the NBA. So then I just had to figure out who in the NBA to tell. And there was a natural choice. I thought, I'm going to tell the Dallas Mavericks. And why did I choose the Dallas Mavericks? I chose the Dallas Mavericks because they're owned by Mark Cuban. And you may know who Mark Cuban is. If you don't, he's just like a total weirdo. He's much younger than most NBA owners. He's like a self-made tech billionaire. He has millions of Twitter followers. He has written children's books. He's done pro wrestling. I mean, like, he's been in the ring doing like the camel clutch and everything. He's sort of like a little bit of a 9/11 truther. He's like super weird. He owns the Mavericks and he kind of is a Maverick. And even better than that, his email address is online. It's like anyone can find his email address. It's I'm telling you, you can write it down. It's mark.cuban@dallasmavs.com. Do what I did, email Mark Cuban. So I went home and I sat down and I started emailing Mark Cuban, and I laid out the whole thing. I said, here's the stats, home and away. The wiggle sticks don't do anything. What you need is a wiggle stick conductor. You need someone who can lead the people, who can take all of their raw moron hand-waving energy and harness it and focus it into a laser, and then just shine that laser into the opposing player's eye. And I sent it off, and I started making dinner. And about half an hour later, I heard a ping on my computer, and I went and I checked my inbox, and there was an email from mark.cuban@dallasmavs.com. And I thought, it's probably, one of his, army of flunkies or something. But I opened it up, and it really was from Mark. And I printed out the email so I could read it to you. And also because it's a cherished possession. Okay. It could work. That's how he started the email. He just gets right into it. He says, it could work. The conductor is a great idea, as long as no one in the NBA is told. I'm happy to try it. What other ideas do you have? I love using science to gain an advantage. It's Mavs time. So I was really excited about this email, as you can imagine. Especially, I loved the way he signed off. I later discovered this was sort of like an automatic email sign-off on his program, or his email program. But at the time, I liked sort of indulging the fantasy that he was just so excited. He was like just typing his message to me, and at the end, he's just like, it's Mavs time, and he just hit send, and was like, yeah. But I also really liked the fact that he had said, I don't know if you caught it, he said, what other ideas do you have? What other ideas did I have? What other ideas did I have? I actually had no other ideas, but it seemed to me that I could have other ideas if I thought of other ideas, and then I could present those ideas to Mark Cuban, and he could put those ideas into practice, and we could get a whole thing going where he was the owner and I was like the guy with ideas, and we would sort of be partners. And the more I thought about it, it just seemed natural. I'd be like a neuroscience consultant to the National Basketball Association. And why not? I mean, it seemed like Mark and I had kind of a lot in common. Like, we were both from the East Coast, both descended from Russian Jews. We both love science. We both love science, using science to gain an advantage, as he pointed out in his email. He was like an eccentric billionaire, and I was like an eccentric thousandaire, and we could just work together to do something. So I wrote back right away. I was like, Mark, I just want you to know, I don't think this is against the rules at all. I looked in the NBA rulebook. It seems fine. And he wrote me back right away. It was like we were basically on IM. So I have that email too. I don't want other teams to catch on or have the league ban it, he said. But we will try to get everyone waving in unison starting tomorrow. It's Mavs time. I was so excited. I mean, you have to understand, I had spent like weeks and months of my life doing these experiments in a basement that just to get like an ounce of data to publish in an obscure journal about like cats reaching for things. And now, in less than 24 hours, Mark Cuban was going to take my idea for basketball and he was going to put it live in front of tens of thousands of people at the American Airlines Arena or hundreds of thousands of people or however many people were watching. And I was like, this is my Alexander Fleming moment. This is my penicillin. This is a real thing. This is science. And sure enough, they played the Celtics the next night. I couldn't watch that game. It wasn't nationally televised. But the next day in the lab, I checked the box scores. And they had done the idea as far as I knew. And the Celtics only shot 60% from the line. That may sound pretty good, but it's significantly lower than league average, and that kind of thing makes a difference. And the next game was against the Lakers, and that game was nationally televised. So I got some friends together, and we went out to a sports bar, and they had NBC on, and we were watching the game. In the first quarter, Kobe Bryant gets fouled, and he goes to the line, and they do this, like reverse angle, so you're seeing from behind him, and you see behind the backboard, and all the Mavericks fans are waving in unison. And in fact, the Mavericks have this like costume mascot troupe called the Fun Slingers. And there's a fun slinger. And he's got this sign a white sign with red arrows, and he's leading people and waving their arms left to right. And I'm like, wow, it's really happening. And Kobe takes a dribble and he shoots and he just totally bricks the shot. And I was like, this is working. I'm in Kobe's head. It's fucking Mavs time. And so he hit the next shot, but I was still pretty into it. And then other Lakers came to the line and they made their shots. And by the end of the game, the Lakers had actually shot just about league average. So something was off. And I did notice that, the fans were kind of like this, and then they were like this, and then they'd get bored and kind of be like this. And it just seemed like it wasn't working perfectly. So I thought I need to get in touch with Mark. He wants more of my ideas. So I wrote Mark and I said, okay, I've got another idea. You need to upgrade your wiggle stick. That's the problem. This is a technology problem. And I proposed some, in retrospect, not a very good plan, but I was like, you could take the wiggle stick and you could put like an LED light in it and a plastic disc hanging on a swivel mount with a catch. And I really had I still think this is sort of a good idea. But anyway, if everyone is waving this thing, you can design it in such a way that it'll only show the light if they're pulling the sticks in one direction. So they could do whatever they want. And Kobe would see like a field of red lights moving in one direction. So I write him this 8,000 word email about this. And I'm like, it'll be really cheap. I'll send you blueprints. And he doesn't write back. And the next day I get a phone call and it's from a guy named Matt. Now, Matt is the Dallas Mavericks VP of Marketing and Communications. And Matt, first of all, thanks me for my enthusiasm. And then he tells me that technically speaking, what I've suggested is like totally against the rules and would merit like massive fines if they ever did it. And he tells me about other problems too. He says they're having personnel problems. He says the fun slingers aren't super into the idea. Like Mark Cuban likes it, but they're not always doing it. And there's he was telling me about this kid-friendly horse character who keeps deserting his post and going up to the Dr. Pepper Club to do children's birthday parties. And he's just we're still doing it, but, calm down, basically. So I say, okay. And the next game is against the Pacers. And just like the Lakers, the Pacers shot exactly league average. And I had a bad feeling. This whole thing with Matt getting in touch with me just seemed like a bad sign. But I emailed Mark again, as I was doing on a regular basis at that point. And he wrote back. But this time, he didn't write back just to me, as he had before. He wrote back and he CC'd Matt. And he CC'd several other people I'd never heard of in the Mavericks organization. And this is the third and final email from him. He said, Dan, it failed miserably last night. Didn't work at all. I think our early success was random. It's Mavs time. So with that, I realized that my experiment in the NBA was pretty much over. In fact, it was over, and like many other experiments I'd run, it was a failure. I did end up writing a, sort of an essay or an op-ed about this experience and my idea for Slate.com, and my editor at Slate really did like the story, and he actually ended up sending me an email that sort of echoed the first email from Mark Cuban. He said, what other ideas do you have? And by that summer, I was writing regularly for Slate, and I ended up dropping out of grad school. And in fact, that experiment in the NBA was so bad, was such a failure, that it pushed me out of science altogether and into journalism. But there is one little postscript, which is a few months after this, I met a guy who's from Dallas who is a pretty serious Mavericks fan. And I thought, perfect guy to tell this story to. So I told him the whole thing. And I told him how Mark Cuban had said it failed miserably and all that. And he said, well, that's ridiculous, because I was just at a Mavericks game and they're still doing it. They're totally doing your idea. The fun slingers are out there. Like even the kid-friendly horse character is like involved now. He's on board. And at first I was really annoyed, and I was like, I don't believe it, whatever. And then I thought, no, it makes perfect sense, because Mark Cuban is a really smart guy. And he knew this was against the rules, so he doesn't want me blabbing about it on Slate.com or whatever. But he also knows that you can't draw up any conclusions from a small sample size of 3 games. He's going to keep this experiment going. So there's like this data set out there of, I don't know how many games the Mavericks did it for. I don't know what the shooting percentages were. This is stuff I want to know. So last week, thinking back on this, I wrote Mark Cuban again. This is the first time I've reached out to Mark, my old friend, in 10 years. And I said, what happened with this thing? But I am sorry to report, this time he didn't write back. Thank you.
That was Daniel Engber. Daniel is a senior editor at The Atlantic. As always, remember you can check out our website for upcoming live shows all around the US, Canada, and the UK in 2023, as well as opportunities to learn how to tell your own science story through one of our storytelling workshops. We're registering now for our January public workshop. Check that out at storycollider.org. For more updates and cool behind-the-story pictures and other awesome content, follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. Find us at Story Collider. And finally, if you're a fan of this podcast, and if you, like all of us at the Story Collider, believe in the power these stories have to reveal the humanity behind science, to change our understanding of how science happens and who it belongs to, please consider donating to the Story Collider at storycollider.org/donate. You can also sign up to support us on a monthly basis at patreon.com/thestorycollider. Our Patreon supporters can receive an ad-free version of this podcast, as well as occasional bonus episodes and other gifts. We're so grateful to everyone who helps make our work possible.
What's the best way to learn a new language? Immersion. But sometimes that's not in the cards. But you can still learn a language the second best way, and that's with Babbel. Now, I might only be 1 week into learning German with Babbel, but I'm so excited to start being able to speak German with my mom. With Babbel, you can learn everything you need to have real-world conversations, and all it takes is just 10 minutes a day. One study found that using Babbel for 15 hours is equivalent to a full semester at college, which is bonkers. But Babbel is conversation-based learning with science-backed cognitive tools like spaced repetition and interactive lessons created by real language teachers and voiced by real native speakers. So here's a special limited-time deal for our listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/story. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/story. Spelled BABBEL.com/story. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Our second story today is from Baratunde Cola. It was recorded in March 2014 at the New American Shakespeare Tavern in Atlanta, Georgia, as part of the Atlanta Science Festival.
I grew up in Pensacola, Florida, where Hall of Fame football players are born. At 8 years old, I was a legend, known for carrying 3 boys on my back 10 yards for a score and touchdown. And my pants were falling down in the process. But thanks to my dad, a mechanical engineer, I also liked math and science. He even put a whiteboard in my room in middle school with a daily algebra challenge. Because I was motivated to be the best at academics and football, I chose to go to Vanderbilt University. Vanderbilt competed in the SEC with the kings of college football, and they were known for tough academics. I went to Vanderbilt as a freshman, and I joined the football team as a walk-on offensive lineman, which, despite my status as an all-star in my hometown, meant that they really didn't want me on the team, so they didn't offer me a scholarship. But I was okay with this because I had a partial engineering scholarship and some savings, but I really needed that athletic scholarship to afford my sophomore year. My first semester at Vanderbilt kicked my butt. It was so different from what I was used to. I got a little bit better my second semester, my grades started to improve, and I rebuilt my body into what a college football player was supposed to look like. My chest was finally sticking out further than my stomach. And by the time spring football practice came around, it was ending, I was even optimistic about earning a scholarship. The day after spring football practice ended, I went to play basketball with a couple of teammates. It was also the day before my big meeting with the coach to discuss the scholarship. So I was nervous, but basketball helped me to relax. It was competitive that day, and my new athletic body was flying around making plays. And on one play, I flew up above the rim for a rebound. And when I came down, I landed on someone's foot and hit the ground for probably the 3rd or 4th time that game. But this time I didn't get up. I was on the ground in a different type of pain, and on the way down, I heard a pop in my knee. I brushed the pain and the pop off when I finally got up. I convinced myself that it was just a sprain. I had done that before. But I hobbled slowly over to see the team doctors, and when I got there, their tests revealed that I tore my anterior cruciate ligament, ACL. I really didn't know where that was in my knee, but what I heard clearly was that it was going to require major surgery and a year of rehab before I could return to football. I tried to be optimistic, but my eyes were red, holding back tears, and if this wasn't enough, then they say, son, we can't cover your expenses because you're a walk-on. I had just turned 18. I was just getting over a disappointing first semester, and now my chance at a scholarship was gone. I added to my family's financial burden, and I lost control of my life. I didn't have a plan for this. I came back to Vanderbilt my sophomore year despite financial difficulties, and I took a new job as an assistant equipment manager for the football team. Now I had to swallow my pride for this job because it kept me close to my teammates that were doing what I was supposed to be doing. And at the same time, I had to stomach jokes from some of them inspired by Adam Sandler's movie, The Waterboy, that was out at that time. Hey, Waterboy, bring me some water, they'd say. But clearly, I was an equipment manager, not a water boy. Idiots. I picked up research that semester as well with one of my favorite professors. We developed code for engineering software, and I found the work to be surprisingly therapeutic. But I was eager to get back on the field. And that summer, I became a monster in the weight room. I was curling as much as 100 pounds with each arm. And I was in the best shape of my life. My junior year, I came back, I took out loans, and I was finally ready to go. I switched to a new position, fullback, because I thought it gave me a better chance to play. But my plan was still not working, and I only got to play in practice. The coach just wasn't giving me a shot to do what I knew I could do. In practice, on this one play, I went out for a pass, and when I made a turn, the defender came up and hit me, which was usual. But this time I got caught in an awkward position during my turn, and my repaired knee gave way, and I was on the ground. I couldn't believe it. And I knew at this point that this time my football career was over. In the spring of my junior year, I found comfort in research again. And that summer, I took a position converting waste heat to electricity with nanostructured diamond. The project and the professor leading it got me excited about the prospects of nanotechnology. This professor could sell it. Plus, he was a former college athlete, so we connected. And by the end of the summer, I could see myself leading a nanotechnology company one day and possibly going on to grad school to learn more about it. But I could barely afford to finish undergrad. So the thought of more school at that point was just too much. So my senior year, I continued research, and I also went back to the football equipment staff, but I got a promotion. I was the head equipment manager. But this time, there was no hope of me going back to football, so the job made me feel like a loser. Don't get me wrong, I appreciated the job because I needed it to finish school. And I worked with great people, but the job just reminded me of my failed goals, and it was so painful. Near the end of that season, the football coach got fired, which happens in big-time sports when you don't perform. And I was sitting in the equipment room when my boss came in to tell me the news. The equipment room was a social gathering place, a type of place where news like that traveled first. But I didn't care who the new coach was. My playing days were over, and I was graduating in the spring. But I looked him up anyway. I noticed that his offense featured a fullback, my position, and that the prior coach didn't really use a fullback. And I thought, who would fill this role? Now, my knee was feeling okay, and I was in good shape, but the thought of me going back after what I had been through was crazy. But the thought lingered in my mind. Oh, that was trouble. But what did I have to lose? My dream was calling. Plus, if I broke my knee again, it could be fixed. It's hard for me to explain to you what the face of a new coach looks like when the head equipment manager comes to his office and says, I want to play now. Following that with, and I'm recovering from 2 ACLs, probably didn't help. But I pushed my body to the limits in winter conditioning. I never stopped lifting weights, and I was actually one of the strongest guys on the team at the time. But my coordination and agility was hard to get back. And the coaches didn't give me a pass for that. So some of them tried to run me off. I'd like to say that at some point, I was given a shot at a great comeback story, like Rudy. He didn't come back, but when spring practice started, the coaches listed me 5th, last at fullback. I was even behind 2 other walk-ons, and one of these guys was thinner than one of my legs. What a nightmare this was for me. The first 4 days of practice, I was virtually a spectator, and I didn't see the prospects for this changing anytime soon. And it occurred to me that despite my efforts, I might be wasting my time and be better off salvaging my chance to find a job after graduation. But I gave it one last shot, and I talked to the coach after practice. I spoke frankly of my circumstances, and I asked for my chance. And to his credit, he gave it to me, and he said, I'll give you one play. My role as fullback on this play was to lead the ball carrier through the line and make the key block for a successful play. Despite getting no reps in practice, I was ready for this because the play required precise footsteps and footwork, and I had practiced in front of my mirror in my dorm room many times. On the snap of the ball, I ran through the line, and I unleashed a collision on this linebacker and the thump of our pads could probably be heard in the upper deck of the stadium. This guy, 6'4", 240-pound, All-American linebacker, I drove him into the ground. And I looked up, and the ball carrier zoomed by me for a score. Touchdown. The team erupted. But I stayed cool because after what I had been through, it was going to take a little bit more than one play for me to get excited, which added to the disbelief on the coach's face. And when the team settled, he was like, do it again, like a dare. But in this moment, with what was put in front of me, I was unstoppable. And in 2 plays, I went from 6th on the depth chart to competing with a high school All-American for the starting position, which I eventually won. Booyah! The joy of Cola was alive, and I was going to engineering grad school too, because I finally won my football scholarship. I was recently awarded the highest recognition that our government gives to young scientists and engineers for my work in nanotechnology and energy. I got to shake President Obama's hand in the East Room of the White House, and I have a great photo to prove it. But I never expected my life to be where it is today. My 2 injuries forced me out of football, which introduced me to research, which is a major part of my life today. But looking back, I realized that it was overcoming my injuries and going back to football with success that ultimately gave me the confidence and determination to go to grad school and do well there. And after, to become a professor and one hell of an engineer at one of the world's finest research institutions, Georgia Tech.
That was Baratunde Cola. Baratunde is a scientist who has been recognized with awards from President Obama and the American Association for the Advancement of Science. The Story Collider is so grateful to Dan and Bara for sharing their stories with us. The Story Collider is also very grateful for the support of Science Sandbox, a Simons Foundation initiative dedicated to engaging everyone with the process of science. This podcast is produced by me, Erin Barker, Executive Director and co-founder of The Story Collider, along with Managing Producer Misha Gajewski and Senior Podcast Editor Jun Chen, with help from Education Director Lily B. Special thanks goes out to Story Collider's board and the rest of our staff, including Managing Director Anne-Marie Lonsdale, Science Advisory Fellow Edith Gonzalez, and Operations Manager Lindsay Cooper, without whom none of this would be possible. The stories featured in today's episode were from shows produced by me and my Story Collider co-founder Ben Lilly, and by me and producer Ari Daniel. Our theme music is by Ghost. Until next week, I hope everybody has a happy new year. We'll be back in 2023 with more new episodes, new stories that you haven't heard yet on this podcast. But we really appreciate all of your support in 2022. We really appreciate you listening, donating, making Story Collider what it is. Thank you so much for being a part of our story. Huge thanks to our staff and our team of freelance producers for all that they contribute. And a huge, huge thanks to every storyteller who has graced our stage this year. Thank you so much for sharing your stories with us. Thank you all for listening.